Hi, I'm old. Old Bill, they call me. In fact, I'm turning 40 the day after this video goes out. But you know what? I feel good. I feel lucky. Lucky to have grown up alongside video games and getting to see all the many different new games and consoles and gaming styles come out over the years. In fact, I'm older than the first multiplayer shooter by 3 years. While I was a bit young to appreciate it at the time, being 3 years old, MIDI Maze was a big hit on the Atari ST in 1987. You could network together up to 16 computers by daisy-chaining MIDI cables, and you could play deathmatch with your, I'm going to say, colleagues in the music department. And then, just 10 years later, in 1997, I was just the right age to appreciate the coming of one of the biggest leaps in multiplayer first-person shooter gaming. GoldenEye 007 for the Nintendo 64. When I was a kid, me and my sisters and my cousins would all go around to my nan's house every Sunday. We'd have a big Sunday lunch together and all the kids would play together. And one of my earliest memories is me sitting on my nan's lap as she told my parents she was thinking of getting a Sega Mega Drive for us to play on Sundays. This must have been late 1990 or 1991. It was in that short period where the Sega Mega Drive had come out but the Super Nintendo hadn't just yet. And I remember crying and pleading with her, "Nan, don't get a Sega, get a Nintendo." And this is that very Nintendo. Check this out. Action-packed excitement for the entire family. This little tantrum set the course for the rest of my life. I eventually got a Mega Drive, basically for the Sonic games, but I was, and still am, a Nintendo kid. I have many happy memories playing on the NES on those Sundays with my cousins. And then, as well as a PlayStation, at some point in 1998, my nan also picked up a Nintendo 64 with GoldenEye included as the pack-in. I remember saying, "Nan, this game's too violent for you. We should swap. You take my Mario 64 and I'll take your GoldenEye." Me and my friends played a lot of multiplayer GoldenEye. It's a pretty basic deathmatch by today's standards. You and up to 3 other players are in a maze with a chosen set of weapons to collect and you shoot each other to bits. There were a few scenarios you could pick as well, such as License to Kill, which made all shots one-hit kills. License to Kill pistols made for a very tense and exciting match. To make it even more tense, one of my friends had 2 TVs and a SCART splitter, so he could output his Nintendo 64 on both simultaneously. So we used to cut cardboard to exactly the right size to cover up the other player's half of the screen and tape it on, so we couldn't see what the other player was up to. The man with the golden gun puts one golden gun, a one-hit kill weapon, somewhere in the arena, and you become the target if you pick it up. The Living Daylights is basically flag tag. It's pretty cool. So why was all of this so revolutionary? Well, before the Nintendo 64, the most advanced controller was this. Oh, sorry, I booped your snoot. Oh, you okay? The most advanced controller was this, the PlayStation 1 controller, before the DualShock. How are you expected to control a first-person shooter with that? In the PC space, Quake was already out, and people were still figuring out how best to control it with the mouse and keyboard. WASD wasn't a thing to start with, and to mouse look you had to hold down a button. Unless you put plus M look 1 in the console or in the configs, of course. But we were getting there. Over on consoles, meanwhile, the first thing even close to being viable for first-person shooter controls was this tri-wing monstrosity. And I say monstrosity, and that's really only with the benefit of hindsight. At the time, we thought this controller was incredible. The idea was, I have to put you down. I have to put you down for just a little bit. You can come back later. Or you can get in the way of the, or you put your tail and you can just stay there in front of the camera. Please do not knock the camera. Just, it's fine. Okay, so the idea with this, you could hold it in 3 different ways, right? You've got your traditional sort of 2D way, holding the left and right, prongs like that. You could hold the middle and the right, and then you've got your analog games, or you've got the so-called left position, where you can use the D-pad and the analog stick. That'll work for first-person shooters, wouldn't it? Moving with the left hand on the digital controls, analog stick to look with the right, pretty spot on. But the so-called left position was only used as standing in a few places. There's a Pokemon Stadium mini-game where you use the D-pad to aim and you flick the stick like that to fling ekans. That's about it, really. Back then, the standard controls for first-person shooters like GoldenEye was that you'd use the stick and you'd use the C buttons. But in GoldenEye, they always bound the D-pad to do the same as the C buttons, so you could just swap that way if you wanted to. I don't think anyone did, but you could. But maybe if you wanted to revisit GoldenEye, you could do that. Another popular way to revisit GoldenEye is PC emulation, with patches to support mouse and keyboard controls. I gave this a try, but I found it way too easy to play through the game with the precision of a mouse. Here's some footage of me playing the same level on Nintendo 64 and then on PC. Okay, he's shooting around that guy. He seems totally unbothered by it. Oh, okay. Oh, there's a grenade. Okay. I mean, sort of got out of the first room there. Sort of. Let's have another go. Ah, exploding filing cabinets. Good work, Q. See if that helps us get out of the room. Yep, just about. There we go. Oh, yeah. I mean, the death animations are cool with the different angles and stuff. Okay, let's have one more go at this. Okay. Yeah, there we go, getting it. Aim's a bit off there, but filing cabinets to the rescue again. And there we go, out of the first room, and up the stairs, and that's where this run ends. This is 00 Agent though, it's supposed to be hard and I'm 2.5 decades out of practice. Let's see how I did on the PC. Yeah, okay, you get the idea. So maybe the game was designed with the controller in mind. Like, the controller was part of the challenge. But how could that be if it was a good controller? I mean, we were amazed when we first saw it. The big reveal of the Nintendo 64 was Nintendo's Spaceworld 1995, and the controller was a big part of it, of course, with these graphics showing you how you could hold the controller these 3 different ways. A lot of the floor demonstrations were effectively about what is an analog stick, as was Shigeru Miyamoto's presentation, which focused a lot on the stick and how the memory pack works. I'll link it in the description so you can watch the whole thing. This article from Nintendo Magazine System in January 1996 talks about how amazing this controller is, and comfortable, and instinctive. They still call it the NU64 because until its announcements at Spaceworld it was called the Nintendo Ultra 64, and even though this was after the reveal they were still hedging the name, I guess. But anyway, there's that graphic again of the 3 ways you can hold the controller. How's that for versatility? Never mind that we only really held it one wrong way in the end though. Still, we thought this controller was incredible, and just 2 years later, FPS games were designed to seemingly work around it. Yeah, I mean, I guess it just wasn't made with FPS in mind. It feels weird trying to play Mario 64 with anything else, of course, but I guess Shigeru Miyamoto just wasn't really a Doom fan. Revisiting GoldenEye today, and something's definitely sort of off. Even though I'm playing it with the dual stick controls, it doesn't quite feel right. Still feels kind of, I don't know, clunky. Actually, we can talk about the controls a little bit. So 1.1, this is the default controls. This has the stick to move forwards and backwards and look left and right, and your C buttons are for strafing and looking up and down, and this is quite horrible. If we change it to 1.2, that's always the one I used back in the day. 1.2 Solitaire, all named after Bond girls. This one I'm pretty comfortable with. This is the C buttons to move around and the control analog stick to aim. I know that it's kind of the opposite way around from what we'd expect, having the moving on the right and the looking on the left hand, but we can, if we want to, hold it in that left position we talked about earlier. So I've got the D-pad now to move, got the stick to look. I guess if you were to revisit GoldenEye on original hardware, this is probably the control scheme you'd want to use, right? So let's have a look at the other control options. Let's go to the 2.1. So this is the cool feature, right? For getting dual stick on the Nintendo 64, you get two controllers, and here we've got 2.1 plenty. Let's see what this does. So you've got one stick. Oh, okay, so that's same as 1.1. That's this for moving forwards and backwards and turning, and this one looking up and down and strafing, which is even worse when you're using a stick to do it. So let's change that. We've got control style 2.2. Okay, so that's got this one to look and this one to move. Okay, yeah, that seems good, but we're still the opposite way around to usual, aren't we? But you can do a trick with the Nintendo 64 dual stick controls. Okay, there we go. Dual stick. That door's still locked. You can threaten this scientist. There we go. Twin stick controls are surprisingly not bad, and the game is still pretty fun, but this is a good single player game, right? This is having a good single player experience here, aren't we? I think. I mean, I suppose I've stopped making a video now and I'm just playing GoldenEye. Yeah, I see you clipping through the door. When they originally started designing this, it was going to be an on-rails shooter like Virtua Cop or something like that, and you get the feeling with some of the levels that they were at least conceived back in those original design documents, such as this one, which is just like a shooting gallery through a fairly linear set of corridors. I say though, I do like these levels a little bit more than the outside ones. Oh, objective failed, okay. Notice how I was doing a perfectly good job getting through the level there, and then one of the soldiers blew up the thing I was supposed to take a photo of, like completely failing the mission for me. You didn't see that in the movies, did you? Bond's here, let's blow up our own satellite so he can't take a picture of it, and then he fails the mission and has to do it all again. You see, there we go, failed. Great. Of course, I only really get to play single player now. It's much harder to find someone to play GoldenEye with me now than when I was 14. But I definitely played the heck out of this game when it came out. I finished it on 00 Agent and got every cheat except for 2 ICP-90s, and anyone who played it back in the day knows why. That challenge was about training speedrunners, and it's not for me. The cheats were neat though. Rare made this game and Rare made Donkey Kong, so they put in a DK mode cheat, which gave all the characters massive heads and ape proportions. As well as looking weird, it made it easier to get headshots in the multiplayer. Tiny Bond and Turbo mode combined for good fun too. Ever wanted to scurry around a bunker in 7i as a tiny little mouse with a revolver? It's good times. I used to like going through the game with the Moonraker laser because I was 14 and lasers are cool. For some reason there's a laser cheat and a 2 lasers cheat. The gold PP7 is very satisfying as well. It gives Bond's standard issue pistol 1-hit kills on anything and makes it shiny. Of course all guns gives you all of these, and because it's literally all guns, Bond gains the ability to shoot tank shells from his skull. That's just good, clean fun, isn't it? If you could have one superpower. The objective-based mission structure of the single player has kind of fallen out of favour in recent years. GoldenEye had it, the spiritual successor Perfect Dark had it, other Bond games such as EA's Tomorrow Never Dies also had it. Apart from that, then when a bunch of GoldenEye developers left Rare to form Free Radical Design, they created the Time Splitters series, which also had this objective-based mission structure. Free Radical Design closed in 2014, reformed again in 2021, and then closed again in December 2023. Another sad casualty of games industry restructuring, and specifically of the Embracer Group. It's a shame. Free Radical Design had some crazy talented designers and developers, including this guy. Look, it's David Doak, one of the founders of Free Radical Design, just chilling in facility. You could get to the end of a long level and fail the mission because you forgot to use a particular console or blow up a particular thing, or the enemies blew up a particular thing that you needed. And in that sense it got kind of frustrating, but it really helped the feeling of being James Bond. Some of the set pieces from the film are recreated incredibly well in games, such as using your watch laser to escape from the bullet train. There are some differences. Bond never went to Severnaya, and in this game he goes there twice, but being captured on the second visit leads to one of my favourite levels. Bunker 2 opens with you in a prison cell next to Natalia, and you use the watch to grab the cell key, knock out the guard, and you can find some throwing knives in a hole for some reason. This mission feels like Bond. And that's part because you're not just getting to the end, you're taking the opportunity to grab some intel along the way and destroy the cameras so there's no evidence of your activities. Although, as much as I enjoy this level, I really feel like Natalia's not taking it seriously. I suppose the escort sections are just another way in which this game has aged, not just in terms of technology and control, but design as well. You wouldn't design an escort mission with a character who just casually wanders around opening doors to let the enemies through. Whose side are you on, Natalia? David Doak, what are you doing here? I thought we were buds. Rare only had so many faces. The tank sections also feel clunky and outdated in how they control, and the level design just isn't as tight as maybe it would be in a modern shooter. Statue Park, for example, is just a big old dark mess of statues, and I always found myself getting lost. Archives 2 has so many extraneous rooms and corridors that just go nowhere and contain nothing. This was fine in 1997, but in modern design you guide the player a little more and add a few collectibles or interesting weapon pickups to reward exploration. This is where some of you have started writing your comments. And I know GoldenEye hasn't aged well is such a trope at this point. But people normally just put it down to graphics or controls and stop there. But there's more to it. And it's time we admit that. Because it's also the map design. It's the occasionally unclear objective design. It's the AI. It's Natalia either wandering through storms of bullets like they're nothing or running off to hide because she heard a bang. And there's no in between. But do you want to know the biggest example of badly aged game design in GoldenEye? It's the infinitely spawning enemies. So many levels depend on infinite enemies running in and shooting you. In the Severnaya missions, it's your punishment for setting off an alarm. The alarm might stop, but these elite enemies with dual SMGs and body armour never do. On some later missions, it's like Rare barely did any enemy placement. They just put some infinitely spawning enemies on a timer and called it a day. Statue Park, Depot and Control are the ones where I noticed it the most, but there are others. In a game where you're supposed to be sneaking around and exploring and finding these objectives, infinitely spawning enemies work directly against the game design and encourage you to run through before Bond has more bullet in him than in his guns. If you know the game, you can do that, but if you're fairly new to it and just want to look around a bit, having your health constantly chipped away by infinite baddies puts an artificial timer on your fun. You want to feel like you're James Bond, and that illusion is taken away from you by being constantly shot at. I've not watched every Bond film, but I've watched quite a few, and I've never seen Bond be a bullet sponge for 10 minutes. He has a firefight, and then there's a quiet bit where he sneaks around. The infinitely spawning enemies know where you are at all times, so you can't sneak around anymore. Listen, this is actually quite a big deal for quite a lot of the levels. If Rare had made the game exactly the same but put a limit on the number of enemies that would spawn, then the game wouldn't have aged as badly as it has. But as it stands, the trope is true, and GoldenEye has aged badly. You can resume commenting now if you want. Remember though, I wouldn't talk for this long and in this much detail about a game if I didn't love it too. And there are parts that have aged well. I'll still defend the mission structure, for example, which also provided a new differentiator between the difficulty settings. Rather than just throwing more and tougher enemies at you, higher difficulty settings had more objectives to complete. This added to the replay value significantly. If you were new to the game, you weren't going to go straight in at 00 Agent with any measure of success, but you'd play through on Agent, then you'd be ready to play through it all again on Secret Agent, and you get to see more of the game. It sounds like padding, doesn't it? But it wasn't padding, it was replay value. Or were the difficulty settings just dumbing down the game so you're giving half an experience to less experienced players? The mission structure was a good idea, wasn't it? wonder why it's not so popular these days. I mean, it was really only these two developers who went all in on it, and one of those split from the other. Maybe I'm misremembering something. Let's look at a magazine review. That usually helps. N64 magazine reviewed GoldenEye 007 in their December 1997 issue. They spoil it somewhat here in the contents. If there was a game to buy an N64 for, it's this one. It's simply the best. I get it, because Tina Turner did the theme song for the film. They devoted fully 10 pages to Tim Weaver's review. Yes, Sunday Times best-selling author Tim Weaver. After the description of all the levels and how to finish them, a review of all the guns, which ranks the Klob higher than the KF-7 Soviet. This is the weak and wildly inaccurate submachine gun named after Nintendo of America executive Ken Lobb. He's fine with it though. It wasn't because he was also weak and wildly inaccurate, they just happened to be talking when Rare got a letter from Legal saying they had to give it a new name. Although maybe again that's hindsight, and memories over decades. Maybe at the time the Klob was better than the KF-7 Soviet. What even is reality? The Nintendo 64 was called Project Reality when it was in development. Does that help us any? Would subscribing to this channel help? It's got to be worth a try. Let's read on. The deathmatch option in GoldenEye 007 is stunning. Yes, it is stunning, I remember. The 11 arenas are a mix of the brilliant one-player levels and one specifically designed for the multiplayer setup. Yes, I remember Complex, that was a great level. GoldenEye didn't control like other shooters at the time. You couldn't normally jump off ledges, so in these arenas with 2 levels, you didn't have the option of jumping down and ambushing your opponents. You had to shoot at them from above. This also meant you couldn't accidentally fall or get shot off the edge, which was nice. Made it more accessible, I think. Stack was like that as well with the 2 levels. You always had to remember to pick Stack. Stack was above Basement, and Library was both Stack and Basement, but it was way too big, even for 4 players. Anyway, back to the review. So just how good is GoldenEye 007? Well, it's certainly the best first-person shooter on the N64. It's also possibly the best first-person shooter in the world. In truth, this is so far ahead of Doom 64 and even Turok that comparisons are pointless. That's true. This game is better than Doom 64. Even Turok. We all remember that, right? Possibly the best first-person shooter in the world. Better than Quake. Better than Doom. Yeah. Must be. Anyway, if you want to revisit GoldenEye, there have been recent re-releases on the Switch and the Xbox Series X/S. The rights got a little bit muddled because Rare used to develop exclusively for Nintendo, and then Microsoft bought Rare, and none of these 3 companies own James Bond. But they got there. Still kind of muddled though. The Xbox version is smoother and has modern controls, but the Switch has online multiplayer. You could just emulate it on PC as well, as I said, and then you get better graphics, modern controls and online multiplayer. But you need some similarly committed friends to set it up. But can you ever really revisit GoldenEye? I think I get what's going on. Time marches inexorably forwards, and how we judge art and media is wholly informed by the standards and the expectations we have at the time. Not just how we ourselves choose to interpret it, but how our tastes are informed by the society around us. We knew GoldenEye was awesome because everyone around us knew that GoldenEye was awesome. It's like we were told en masse what to believe, and we believed it unquestioningly and lived our lives as though it was true and grew up with memories, false memories, telling us that GoldenEye 007 was the best game ever made. And then we revisit it. No. Something has changed. Something's not right. Something feels off. Was this game ever good, or was it just the best we had at the time? No, that's too simple. Super Mario Brothers. Super Mario Brothers was the best we had and is a timeless classic. Was it simply about the controls? No, console FPS was a new genre and we hadn't quite figured it out yet. But the game's since been re-released on the Xbox with modern twin-stick controls that work perfectly fine, and it hasn't set the world on fire. It reviewed well, you know? People liked it, but it was people who were playing it in 1997 playing it again on their new Xboxes. It didn't bring a whole slew of new players who were like, GoldenEye is awesome, let's get more games like this with the mission structure, with the infinitely respawning enemies, with the... Maybe we just can't go back. The media that we loved, the places, the people, it's all just these little time capsules bouncing around in our brains that occasionally pop open and remind us of things we used to love, beliefs we used to hold, but it's all just moments in time filtered through decades of experiences that have built up since then, and how much of it's real we can never really know. Okay, so you're about my age, okay? Well, let's do an experiment. So Think of when you first went to school, secondary school or your equivalent, right? Picture two different classrooms that are quite far apart, and imagine how you would get from one to the other. Science lab to Latin class or something, I don't know. And then, right, do the same thing, but think of classrooms that you were in your final year, when you're a senior or whatever, and walk yourself between them. Imagine those corridors and try and build in your mind a map of your school. It's not quite right, is it? It's not all there. There are bits that you've forgotten, there are bits that are missing. Sure, memory's imperfect, but the bits that you do remember, the bits that you can picture, they don't fit together, do they? Because the corridors that you were going through when you were little were much bigger than the corridors you went through when you'd grown up. And that's the same with everything that we remember. We see every memory is through our own perception, right? It's through not just our own eyes and society and through the understanding of the world around us at the age we are, but also just our physical size at the time. Everything affects how we remember something, right? Every memory isn't simply subjective, it's just straight up false. I can't think of this game like it's 1997 because it's got the 2020s on it. I wonder if our memories of GoldenEye are what makes it a disappointing game now. Disappointment, it was never bad, okay? This is not a bad game. It just can't meet our expectations based on our memories of it. The saying that absence makes the heart grow fonder, the idea with that is that the last time you see someone is the last image you have of that person. And your last memory of them, the last time you saw them, is the memory that lingers strongest in your mind. And maybe that's what's happening with GoldenEye. Maybe our memory of GoldenEye is that one last time that we dusted off our Nintendo 64 from the bottom of the wardrobe and pulled it out, unplugged the Xbox, plugged in those old SCART cables and had one last round of License to Kill pistols with our school friends before we all went off to different universities. We surround ourselves with nostalgia with these relics from our childhoods, from the last time that we were ever simply, uncaringly, uncompromisingly happy. You give up so much of your life, of your mind, of your body and your soul in this pursuit of wealth creation. And we want desperately to go back to a time before we had to do that, but we can't. All we've got are our weird tri-wing controllers that barely work and our GoldenEye cartridges with the rusted contacts that only work from one time in 10 and then disappoints you just as much as the other 9. Time marches inexorably forwards and we march alongside it, whether we want to or not. We can march backwards, but we don't delay anything. You know, we just fail to see what's ahead of us until we've already passed it. I miss my nan. I miss my little sister. And when we used to play together, I miss a lot of people I'll never see again. Maybe eventually you just hit an age where you've lost so many people to death or to distance that all you want to do is look back at the times that those people were still around. And if you're lucky enough to have had a good childhood, I mean, childhood is it, isn't it? It's the main part, because it's the last time when everyone's there. And after that, if all you've got to look forward to is loss, is it any wonder you're marching backwards? Except that's a gross oversimplification, isn't it? The point of nostalgia isn't to mire us in the past, but to celebrate it. It's a joyous thing that we can all share in together and make some new friends in the process. Let's be honest, being a child is rubbish. You barely get any video games. No, become an adult and then you can buy all the video games you want. You don't get quite as much time to play them. But we can change that. We can join a union, write to our representatives, try and get a 4-day work week. The world is a scary place, but we can give ourselves more time and freedom to enjoy the things that we want to enjoy, whether old or new. Plus, I found out during my research, for some reason, that Frank Herbert was 45 when he wrote Dune. So I've still got another 5 years to write Dune. The yearning to return to a simpler time, even an imagined one, is part of the human condition. Watch out for politicians who exploit it with slogans like "Make America Great Again." It never ends and it affects everyone. So what do we do about it? Take some time now and again to reminisce to anyone who'll listen. Start a YouTube channel if you have to. The rest of the time, let's see what we can do to make the world better, because all this is ours. We make it what we want to make it, and we make our own fun along the way. GoldenEye 007 was great, but it's gone now, and that's okay. I love and will always love the people with whom I've gamed along the way and won't ever see again. I don't believe really in heart or spirit, but in the mind. That's where those people are now, and the experiences I had with them. And if I ask them if they want me to be moping when I think about them, or to celebrate them and take my memories of them and use them to fuel in myself a desire to make my own life and the lives of those around me a little better and more joyful, I hear their answer loud and clear. We mope! Just kidding. Hey, friends. Hey, you. Thanks for joining me on the Retro Sofa. And seriously, this is brilliant. I feel super lucky because I had this really great childhood with all these great games and all these great people to play them with. And it's really cool that I get to talk about it on YouTube. I get to relive it. I get to do the whole fun, super nostalgia thing. And yeah, you know, looking back is emotional, but most of it's just great. It's a good feeling to celebrate where you came from and the fun you've had along the way. I'm really lucky I get to do that. So, happy birthday. Say it back. Thanks for joining me on the Retro Sofa. And, man, just whatever you do with the rest of your day, cherish every minute of it, yeah? It's a pretty good life out there. Take care.